In this video, we will have a look at the second set of analytical reasoning questions in the free LawPrep mock test. You can access this test for free by visiting the LSAT India official website discoverlaw.in. So like with all analytical reasoning problems in the LSAT India, this time again you're given a set of rules followed by a certain number of questions. I'd advise you to follow the method of first starting off by understanding the passage without looking at the questions. Try to understand as to what the rules are and what the implications of the rules are. Once you're done with truly understanding the passage and the rules given therein, it's very simple to then proceed to the questions and solve them.
All right, so in this set of analytical reasoning questions, you have 7 questions that are based upon this passage. This tells you that understanding the passage is very important. If you proceed to the questions without understanding the passage, you'd end up wasting a lot of time because you'll have to keep looking back at the passage, and as you do that, the likelihood of making mistakes also increases quite a bit. Therefore, first spend a substantial amount of time trying to draw a diagram for the rules that are given to you in the passage. Once you're done with that, go ahead and solve the questions one by one. At this point, I'd like you to pause the video and try understanding the rules and making a diagram by your own self. Only then should you look at my solutions. All right, let's do this together. You know that there are 5 sprinters. Let us only identify them by the first alphabet, H, O, P, T, and V. There is no need for you to even think of the entire name. It's a waste of time. They finished the race from the first position to the 5th position with no ties, and they follow the following conditions. Let's look at the conditions one by one. First condition, V finishes either 1st or 3rd. Now what I'll do is I'll draw 2 diagrams for these 2 cases. As you can see, V either finishes 1st or V finishes 3rd. This is a technique of diagramming that I want you to learn in this video. Let's look at the second rule, which says that T or P could finish 4th, which means that either you could have T in the 4th position or you could have P in the 4th position. Now you might be wondering as to why I have drawn 2 cases each instead of simply drawing 1 case each, one for T in the 4th and one for P in the 4th. This is because what I'll do now is that I'll draw a diagram that incorporates the first 2 rules simultaneously. As we saw, if we have V in 1st or 3rd, which means V is 1, V is 3. Now either you can have T here or you could have P here. You could have T here or you could have P here. This gives you 4 possibilities, and the 4 possibilities are this. You can have these 4 possibilities on the basis of the first 2 rules. So remember, when you started off, when you hadn't seen any rules, you had a lot of possibilities. And as you start seeing the rules, the number of possibilities start to reduce because you're filling in the blanks, right? Right. So on the basis of the first 2 rules, we have 4 cases, 4 possible cases only. Anything that has to happen can only happen within the bounds of these 4 cases. Remember that. Now let's look at our third rule. The third rule says that if either one of Talwar or Hansa finishes 3rd, then the other one finishes 2nd. Now what that means is that if T finishes 3rd, then H finishes 2nd, and if H finishes 3rd, then T finishes 2nd. Now it appears a little difficult at this point to draw this onto the diagram. Let's look at rule number 4 and maybe look at rule number 3 once again thereafter. Rule number 4 says that if T finishes 4th, then V finishes 3rd. Now look at the cases after you look at the rule number 4. Look at the 4 cases. I want you to pay attention. If you look at the second case, you can clearly see that it's already being followed. T finishes 4th and V finishes 2nd. In the cases 3 and 4, T does not finish 4th, and therefore this rule does not apply to these cases. Look at rule number 1. T finishes 4th, but Varma finishes 1st, and this does not conform to the 4th rule. You see, as you look at more rules, the number of possibilities reduces. And I want you to understand this is how conditions work. What is a condition? A condition means that you cannot have all the possibilities. right? And as you look at more conditions, the number of possibilities reduce. So the moment you look at the fourth rule and you see that it does not work, it does not augur well with the first possibility, we have to eliminate this one completely, which means that the first does not exist. So let us now look at the three cases that remain. So after having looked at rules 1, 2, 3 and 4, we know that only three possible cases remain. Now let us look at the third rule once again a little closely. You see, it talks about what happens when Talwar or Hansa finishes third, which means that maybe if Talwar finishes fourth, then what does Hansa do? You cannot say. If Talwar finishes second, well, you cannot say. What if Hansa finishes first, then what happens to Talwar? You do not know any of this. You only know what happens if Talwar or Hansa finishes third. That's the first thing I want you to note. The second thing is that you will find that these do not apply in certain cases. For example, if you look at case number 1, okay, here, you see, if Talwar and Hansa happen to be in this third and second position, then it's going to look like this, with either Talwar or Hansa in the second and third position. Now, where do you think this is possible? Is it possible in the first case? No, because you have Talwar in position 4 and you have V in position 3, which means basically this rule cannot apply in this case. Where could it apply? Do you think it could apply in this case here? No, it cannot apply in the third case either, because you see the third position is occupied by V, which means there's only one place where this can happen, and we can fit that into our diagram. It can happen only in the second case, right? So we've been able to add something more based on this rule into our diagram. Okay, let's move ahead and use this diagram. Right then, so after looking at the rules 1, 2, 3 and 4, here's our diagram. Let's look at rule number 5 and see as to how this further reduces the possibilities in the diagram, right? Maybe you might remove one case, or maybe you might have to write something in between somewhere, thereby reducing the possibilities. Now, what does the fifth rule say? It says that if V or O finishes third, then T does not finish second. Basically, it means that if V3 or O3, then no T2. Now, I want to ask you an important question. Look at O3. Is O3 possible? Look, what we have here is the only three possibilities. And if you look at the third position, you'd see that the third position is already occupied by something else. You can only have V or T in the third position, which means O3 is not at all possible. Very important point, which means that I can now update this rule to just mean if V3, then no T2. Next, now that we have the rule as V3 not being T2, when is V possible? V3 possible? Is V3 possible in the second case? No, because we know that in the second case it has to be either H or T in the third position, which means that this rule of V3 not T2, which means the fifth condition, applies basically only in the first and the third condition. So let us look at these two conditions. First, condition number 1. If you see V3 and you know that T should not be here, it's clear here that already, T is already in the fourth position, so it is already following this rule. Okay, so it's not a matter of concern. There's nothing really we need to write. Now look at the third case, the one where this applies, and therefore what we do is that we additionally make this marking here to signify that when V is in position 3, then T cannot be in 2. Now we have the diagram that we need after having read all the 5 rules. Remember that this is your master diagram. It is very important for you to get a master diagram that clearly and completely and accurately expresses all of the rules that you have seen in the passage. Take this master diagram to each question individually, and then you'll find that it becomes much easier to solve the question. Remember, spend time on the passage. If you do not do that, it will bite you as you get into the questions. Now that we've done this, let's look at the questions one by one. All right, let's begin with the first question. It's labeled question number 7 because it's question number 7 in the free LawPrep mock test, right? But it's the first question of this video. At this point, pause the video, try solving it by your own self before looking at the solutions. Okay, let's do this together now. You see, question number 7 reads, which of the following could be the order in which the sprinters finish the race? It says which one of the following could be. What this tells you is that only one of them could be true. Now, what do you understand from this about the other 3 options, the other wrong options? So you see, one option which could be true is the right answer, and the other 3 are wrong. But what are the other 3 like? The other 3 are cases that cannot be true. Now, does this look like it's a very obvious thing I just said? No, let me explain the difference to you. Now, when you're asked as to whether something could be true, it means that, is it possible for it to be true, or maybe it's also not true? For example, you have 3 cases here. Okay, when I say something could be true, it means that maybe it could be true in this case but not true in these cases, or maybe it could be true in this case but not in these, or maybe it could be true in cases number 1 and 2 but not in 3, which means it either could be true or it's also possible for it not to be true. So could be means maybe it could be untrue as well. But when I say that something cannot be true, that means that it is not true here, it is not true here, and it is not true here in all 3 cases. Therefore, in such a question, you have to solve this by elimination. You have to see as to which those 3 options are, which cannot be true in any case. Therefore, you look at them one by one, check the relevant case. Like you'd find that, let's say if you take a certain option, that option conforms to 1 or maybe 2 of these diagrams, and then you see as to which one is possible. If it's possible for it to happen, well, that is the right answer. The ones that are not possible, never possible, are the wrong options. Let's look at them one by one. Before we proceed, I'd like to emphasize once again that when we are asking if something could be true, the question basically is it possible for this to be true in at least one case? If the answer is yes, then yes, it could be true. But let's say it turns out that it is not true in any of the cases, which means it is false in all 3, then you cannot say that it could be true. Starting with option A. Now, out of these 3 possibilities, when you look at option A, which one does this correspond to? Right? Does it correspond to the first, the second, the third? Which one? Look, if you see, V here is in the first position, right? And you look at the 3 cases here. Where do you see V in the first position? It is only in here, because in the other 2, V is in position 3, which means that for looking at whether if something could be true, you can just check it here, because in these 2 cases it's not true, right? So it's not true in this case because V is not here. In this case it is not true. Let us see if it's possibly true here. You can see here that in the second and third positions here you have H and T, whereas here you have H and P, and we know that P is supposed to be in position 4 according to this case. Therefore we know that A has failed in all 3 cases. A is not true here, not true here, not true here. Therefore A is not the answer. Let's look at option B. Right, option B. Now again in option B you can see that V is in the first position, which means we are basically looking again at the second case. Once again what you see here is that positions 2 and 3 and 2 and 3 here, right? They're not the same. You can see that here there's O, whereas here in this condition you cannot have O. So basically here, because you do not have V, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. Therefore it is not true in any case. Therefore this falls within the category of the other 3. So you saw that in the beginning I said one of them could be. The other 3 options cannot, which means you give them a cross, cross, cross. As you can see, option B also comes within the 3 cross category. Let's look at option C. If you're told that something could be true or it could not be true, that is what is called could be. So for example, if someone asks me whether I'd come for dinner and I say I may come for dinner, what that means is that I may come or I may not come, right? So I may visit you is the same as saying I may or may not visit you. Okay. Now, what we saw in the cases of the options A and B was that it was a cross, cross, cross. Therefore, we were sure that it could not be in any of the cases. Let's look at option C. When you look at option C, when you look at, say, the case number 2 and the case number 3, start with case number 2. Okay. If you look at case number 2, then you can see here that, well, H is not in the first position, therefore you know that it's a cross for case number 2. When you look at case number 3, again you see that you have P in the fourth position, whereas here P is in the fifth position, so again not true, which means that for these two you can say a cannot. But now look at the first case. You have V and T here and you have V and T here. Now it is possible for us to, fit in the H, O and P. According to this, you can put H, O and P according to this, which means that it could be true. This gives you your right answer. You see, it's not necessary that P would be here. Maybe P could be here and then, it turns out it's not. But the question is asking you, is it possible? In this case, yes, it is possible. Therefore, C is the answer. We will look at option D anyway, but we found the answer. The answer is C. Again, look at option D. You have V in the first position, which means we have to look at the case number 2. When you look at case number 2 and you look at the second and third position, again, you can see here that it's not possible for this to happen. Therefore, D also is a cross, cross, cross situation. And so the answer to this question is option C. Right then, next question, try solving it by your own self. Okay, now before I proceed to solve this, I want you to realize as to how useful this diagram is at this point. When you have these three cases, first ask yourself, what case can this apply to, right? Which of the three cases could this apply to? It says Talwar finishes 5th. Look at case number 1. Here Talwar finishes 4th. Obviously, it doesn't apply here. Look at the second case here. Here Talwar is either 2nd or 3rd, which means that again, Talwar is not finishing 5th. Which tells you that in this case, if Talwar is finishing 5th, it has to be case number 3. Now, when we're looking at this, we have some things in place. Now let's look at the options. Right then, so we saw that for the case that if Talwar finishes 5th, we have to look at only one possibility. Let's hide the other two. Now here's the more important thing in this question that I want you to understand. How do you deal with these must be true questions? Look at the question. It says, which one must be true? Which means the right answer, the correct answer, 1, is the one that must be true. Now, what can you say about the other 3 options that are wrong? So we know that 1 is right and the other 3 are wrong. What can you say about these? What you can say about these is that the other 3 could be false. I want you to pause the video and take some time to understand this if you have not been able to comprehend it. If you spend some time, you'll definitely get it. But my very sincere advice is do not bypass this. Do not ignore this. If you don't understand this concept, you're going to have a hard time solving questions on analytical reasoning, logical reasoning, and everywhere else. Okay? So try to understand this. Let me show you how you can solve these questions, okay, on must be true. Let me give you a statement. Ankit always speaks the truth. Let's say you give me a statement like this. Then I say Ankit always gets up at 5:30 a.m. Then you say that Ankit always studies hard, right? And I ask you, which one of the following must be true? Which means, which is the one that is true in all cases? And you have to find out the right answer. What would you do? You will try to eliminate the options that are wrong. And then maybe if you could not eliminate one thing, then that becomes the answer. Now, how do you eliminate something like this? How do you eliminate this possibility? If you can find out a case that, oh, Ankit lied on 14th of May, 2021. Then you can say, hey, Ankit does not always speak the truth, so this is not the answer. Likewise, Ankit gets up at 5:30 a.m. You say that, okay, on 13th July 2016, Ankit got up at 6:30 a.m. So this is also not true. So you can eliminate options, and the one that you cannot eliminate becomes the right answer. I hope you were able to understand what I'm saying, right? So when you're looking at the options now one by one, what you're basically trying to do is you treat every answer as the wrong answer and try to eliminate it. Okay, you try to eliminate, and the one option that you cannot eliminate becomes the right answer, which means that when you have the option A, you ask the question that you would, considering it to be false, considering it to be the wrong answer. So you say, could A be false? This is what you're going to ask. Then for option B, you ask, could B be false? Could C be false? Could D be false? You will find that out of these 4 questions, for 3 of them you will get yes, it could be false, and they are the wrong answers. But for one of them you will get a no, which means that it is not possible for it to be false, which means that it must be true. So therefore you are required to solve these questions by elimination. Okay, so let us look at the questions. Let's look at the options one by one now. Okay, starting with option A. So option A says Hansa does not finish third. Okay, now what is the question that you're going to ask yourself for option A? The question you're asking yourself for option A is, could A be false? Right, which means, is it so? A is saying Hansa does not finish in 3. I'm asking you, could this be false? In other words, we're asking ourselves, could Hansa finish third? Now when you look at this here, you can see that clearly Hansa cannot finish third because V is finishing third, right? V is finishing third. So is it ever possible for A to be false? Can A ever be false? The answer to this is no. There you go. You found your answer immediately. A is the answer. Okay. Now if you look at the other 3 options and you ask yourself the same question, could B be false? The answer will be yes. Could C be false? The answer will be yes. Could D be false? The answer will be yes. For example, let me just take option C. Let's say it says C, H finish is higher than O's. Now what was the highest finish? We remember that the first position was the highest and that the 5th position was the lowest. So C is saying H finishes higher than O. Now the question you're asking yourself is, could? You're asking yourself whether this could be false. So you're asking yourself, could O finish higher than H? Could O finish higher than H? If the answer to this is yes, it means you can eliminate this option. So now look at the cases here. Could O finish higher than H? Of course, if you can put O here, you can put H in this case here, you can put H here, it finishes higher. In this case, it is not possible because you see in this case O would go here, but we are looking at whether it's possible in even one of the cases. Similarly, it could happen even here, right? So these 3, you will find that it either could be true or could be false. Try this out by your own self. In case you found this hard, very good. You've been able to identify something that you find hard. Spend time on it, improve yourself. It will help you in the subsequent questions. Alright, question number 9. It asks you, which one of the following is the lowest possible finish for Hansa? Pause the video, try it by your own self first. Okay, an important question. You see the possibilities of 2nd, 3rd, 4th and 5th only here. Which is the lowest one? Is it the 2nd one or the 5th one? This is where reading the question is so important. It tells you the 1st is the highest, the 5th is the lowest. Do not assume these things, just read the question carefully. Another important question before you start solving it. You are to look at the options one by one, right, to see as to which one is the lowest possible finish. Should you start with the lowest possible one or the highest possible one? Do you begin with 2nd or 5th? I think it's quite obvious to you that you should begin with the lowest one, right? So you start by seeing, is fifth possible? If fifth is possible, it means you've got your answer. But let's say fifth is not possible. Then we look at fourth. Then we look at third. And finally, if those three were not possible, then second becomes the answer. So basically, you start by saying, is it possible for Hansa to finish fifth? If not, then you see, is it possible for Hansa to finish fourth? If not, is it possible for Hansa to finish third? If not, then the answer is second. So let us start off by seeing if it is possible for Hansa to finish in the fifth position. As you can see, this is the fifth position slot. Now, is it possible? You can see that in the second case it is not possible because Hansa is in the second position. But in the cases 1 and 3, definitely H could be here. Therefore, if the question is it possible for Hansa to finish fifth? The answer to that is yes. And therefore, the answer to this question is the option D, fifth. Right then, question number 10. Try solving it yourself before you look at the solutions. Once again, make sure that you use the master diagram to your advantage. Okay, now when you start solving this question, the first thing you should ask yourself is that when Patel finishes first, which of these cases does this correspond to? Now, if you look at the cases 2 and 3, Patel is in the fourth position, which means that the only case that is possible here is the first case, right? So let us only consider the first case in our question. So there you've put Patel in position number 1 and you've hidden the other two cases. Now, once you've done this, the answer simply reveals itself so easily. Look at option C. It says that if Patel finishes first, then Varma finishes third and Talwar finishes fourth. This must be true. Very, very simple answer once you get the diagram in place. Right then, question number 11. Pause the video, try solving it by yourself first, and then let us proceed with the solutions together. Okay, now question number 11 is a very important type of question. And the task here actually first lies in being able to properly comprehend the question. Now, what question number 11 is asking you is, which one of the following is a complete and accurate list of the possible finishes for Talwar? Now, if you ask me what the possible finishes are, there are 5 positions. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So anybody could come either first, second, third, fourth, or fifth. So there are 5 possibilities. Hey, let's just go ahead and mark A as the answer. No, that is not how it works. You have to understand that there are some conditions. And because of those conditions, maybe a certain person may not be able to come third, or someone may not be able to come fourth, or someone may not be able to come first, and so on. So what question number 11 is asking you is, what are the total positions that T could land up in? Let me give you an example with V first, with V, to understand and illustrate this point. Is it possible for V to ever come second? Is it possible for V to ever come fourth? Is it possible for V to ever come fifth? Is it possible, on the other hand, for V to come first? Is it possible for V to come third? You'll see that in these 3 cases, you'll find that yes, it is possible for V to come first. It is possible for V to come third as well. But there are only 3 possibilities here. V can never come second, fourth, or fifth. So if instead of T, here you had V, the correct answer to this would have been first and third. So if there had been an option, maybe if there were an option E which said first and third, and if this had been V, then I would have marked E as the answer. So let us understand the question correctly once again. The question is basically asking you, what are the possible finishes? Let us say T can land up in a certain position in even one of the cases. That is enough. If it lands up in, say, 5th position in one of the cases, it means 5 is possible. If it lands up in the first position in, say, one of the cases only, it means even 1 is possible. So now we have to count what the possibilities are. Okay, so the total number of possibilities are 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Let us see out of this what we can find. Let us start with the case number 1. In case number 1, you can see that T is in the 4th position, which means that T4 is done. Okay. Now, when you look at this second case, you can see that it allows for T in third and for T in second. Both of these are possible, which means you give yourself 2 and 3 as well. So we've already been able to tick mark 2, 3 and 4. Now the question remains for 1 and 5. You see, in the third case here, you have even 1 and 5 available, which means that T can be in position 1, can be in position 2, can be in position 3, 4 and 5, and therefore the answer to this question is the option A, first, second, third, fourth and fifth. Because as you can see across the three cases, it is possible for T to be in all 5 positions. Alright, question number 12. Try solving this by your own self. Just a little while back we saw the meaning of must be true. So when you know that one of them must be true, it means that the other 3 could be false. So we're looking for the one option that is true in all 3 cases. Try solving this by your own self and then we'll go ahead with the solution together. Alright, another must be true question. Pause the video, try solving the question by yourself before you look at the solutions. Alright, look at the first 2 options A and B. They talk about the positions 4 and 5, right? Look at the next 2 options, options C and D. They talk about the positions 1 and 2. Okay. Now look at what the nature of all of these 4 options are. Which one of the following must be true, right? It's talking about these 2 not being in this position, not being in this position, not being in this position. Which means that if you can show that one of these is true in all the cases, right? If any one of these is true in all the cases, you have given the answer, right? In this case, you will find in this particular question, you can solve it even without elimination. Look at the 4th position, okay? Here. You find that in all 3 cases, you're very certain. That's why I'm talking about position number 4. Because you see, in this, if you look at position number 1, well, you don't know what can happen. If you look at position number 2, you really don't know. If you look at position number 5, there's really nothing at all. In number 3 also, there's some amount of doubt here because this could be the T or H. But when you look at position number 4, it is very clear, right? It is very clear that position number 4 can be only T or P. Now look at position number 4 and 4 here, right? So it's saying in option A, 4th is not Hansa, and option B is saying 4th is not Patel. You see, we know that 4th could be Patel, so you cannot say that 4th cannot be Patel, right? So you cannot say B, but you can definitely say A because 4th is not Hansa. You see, 4th cannot be Hansa. Since 4th cannot be Hansa, this must be true. You've got your answer. The answer is A, right? Because you know that H cannot be in the 4th position. And the moment you know that H cannot be in 4th position, it means that the choice says H in 4th and O in 5th. That is not possible. So even though you might have an O in 5th, maybe O can happen in the 5th position, but you can definitely never have the combination of H and O. It's never going to happen. Therefore, this is not possible, right? It can never be possible. And the question is saying that which one of the following must be true. So it will always be true that 4th and 5th cannot be Hansa and Ogule. Alright, question number 13. As you can see, this corresponds to only one case, this one, because if Varma finishes first, it has to be this. Now let's get rid of the other 2 cases. Now what do you know for certain? Like we know for certain that V is in position number 1, that P is in position number 4, and that O would be in position number 5 because that's the only space left. As far as H and T are concerned, we know that it could be either of these 2. Now when you look at the options, you can very clearly see that Patel finishes 4th must be true because it's true in all cases. Therefore the answer very clearly is the option D.